Good evening. Today is the 15th day of October 2015, and we are launched into Savitri. I've changed the title of our talks to Explorations in Savitri. For to explore, we must go deeper, farther, and higher. All through the rest of the book and every canto, Dr. Alok Pandey will be with us, and it is a great blessing to have him, his knowledge, his insights. Welcome, Alok.
Namaste.
Namaste. This is the fifth canto of the first book, the Yoga of the King, the Yoga of the Spirit's freedom and greatness. And it begins with one line. This knowledge first he had of time-born men. You know, when I read this line, I am so moved because I read the letters on Savitri and Sri Aurobindo on himself, and always there's that divine humility. But through the persona of Ashwapati, he can say it, and he says it right here. This knowledge first he had of time-born men. And then this passage, maybe you could talk a bit about.
I think another beauty of some of these one-liners is that they, as if in a single line, summarize a whole world of suggestions. Like for instance, there is another line, again in the Yoga of the King, Book 1, Canto 3, the first line. A world's desire compelled her mortal birth.
Yes.
And I am so fascinated with this line because I feel this in one line, it summarizes the advent of the Divine Mother. It's a whole world aspires for her, for that beauty, for love, for that splendor to be born, for that perfection to come. It may or may not know her as Divine Mother. And yet it invokes, it cries, it longs for her. Through the many hued activities of life, it's actually seeking her.
And it's
knowingly,
the only line.
It's the only line.
Because
knowingly,
after that he
unknowingly.
says something totally different.
Yes, and the whole yoga of Ashupati starts from there.
Yes.
So essentially, Ashupati embodies in himself the entire anguish and aspiration of, if we may now come back to this line, of time-born men.
Yes.
All that humanity has aspired, not necessarily always very consciously, but deep inside, this longing, this aspiration, this hope, this anguish, they're all summarized in this one line, and Ashupati is the protagonist who embodies this anguish and the aspiration. And the mother is, of course, the answer to this aspiration. So it's a very powerful line, as you rightly say, and it moves me also very deeply. This knowledge first he had of time-born men. In one sense, it immediately clarifies, actually it is referring to the previous canto, the secret knowledge. The secret knowledge is known in traditions. For instance, the Vedas speak about it. And yet there is something which has been obviously missed, which we see Sri Aurobindo is putting his finger to.
Yes.
There is the secret knowledge. It's secret because it doesn't come through the senses. It comes by transcending the mind. That's why it is secret. And there we see that step by step, for instance, it is part of secret knowledge to discover the divine within us or within creation. This has been discovered. You know, there are yogis who have discovered the divine within, and they speak about it. They speak about that glory and splendor. But the beauty of the secret knowledge that Ashupati discovers and Sri Aurobindo declares is that divine is not only in creation within us, but the divine has become this creation and has become us.
Yes.
And I think that's the whole hinge upon which the possibility of a divine life moves. If the divine did not become this creation, the creation could not become divine. If the divine is simply seated within, us as an impartial witness to our joy and bale, as
Yes.
and then all that we can do is to withdraw. But the divine has become. We see that we just refer a little back, in Secret Knowledge itself,
Mhm.
on page 66. And we see this hint coming through page 66.
Yeah.
The master of existence lurks in us and plays at hide and seek with his own force. In nature's instrument loiters secret God. So even in the instruments of nature, the divine presence animates. It's like something dynamic flowing through the passages in our brain, in our body, in our cells, everywhere. So, it's a very marvelous passage.
And Sri Aurobindo uses the word loiters,
He loiters.
which is, I would like to read something from Sri Aurobindo in his letters.
Yes.
I have not anywhere in Savitri written anything for the sake of mere picturesqueness,
Yes, yes.
or merely to produce a rhetorical effect.
Yes.
What I am trying to do everywhere in the poem is to express exactly something seen, something felt or experienced.
Yes. Absolutely.
So loiters is the only word there.
Yes. And this is from the electron to the drift of the galaxies. It's he who is found in the silent spaces, with which this creation is abuzz. And that's where he begins to discover this new possibility. And then he goes on further. The immanent lives in man as in his house. So it is his house. It's not just something freak, or it's not an accident of nature. Not that the form has, the divine presence has somehow gone and got into a form. It is his house. It's nobody else's. He has made the universe his pastimes field, a vast gymnasium of his works of might. And then comes this wonderful 4 lines. All-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. Look at the power of these lines. He accepts. And I think even half a phrase is worth meditating, and it's so liberating just to know that we know that he is all-knowing. But we wonder, does he accept us as we are? Of course, the mother says that.
Yes.
Otherwise, there'll be no hope. And here is Sri Aurobindo putting his seal of affirmation on this. All-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. And perhaps I would say, because he is all-knowing, he accepts our darkened state. Because he knows us exactly as we are. And he knows the goal, he knows the way, he knows the origin.
And that beautiful next line.
Yes.
Divine.
Divine wears shapes of animal or man. So it is he who has become all this manifold creation. And this is the knowledge. And then he sees the sailor on the flow of time, that humanity is advancing towards that origin, that source of all things. It's moving towards a perfection yet unseen and unknown, felt intuitively deeply within the human heart, but there are vague hints, but no one really knows where this creation is going, where this world is moving. And this knowledge first he had of time born.
Yes.
There are people who have experienced the divine, but the sense of creation, its deep purpose, it's not just a whim of some creator. It's not a freak, not an accident, but it has a meaning in it, and it's moving towards a high divine consummation. And so this line is remarkable. This knowledge first he had of time-born men. It's not just the knowledge of the divine, but the knowledge of the divine in the becoming. And the mother, in one place in the agenda, says something very interesting. She says, all those who have experienced the divine, they experience the divine in the unmanifest, and they discarded the manifestation as undivine.
Exactly.
Even beings like Buddha, what a mighty, hero. But what we have to discover is the divine not just in the unmanifest, but also in the manifestation. So it is He who is manifesting Himself, and He will continue to manifest. So this is the wonder of this.
And He is the manifestation.
He is the manifestation. He is the manifestation. So we have this knowledge first He had of time-born men, admitted through a curtain of bright mind that hangs between our thoughts and absolute sight. So to begin with, this knowledge pours into him through the bright layers of the intuitive mind, still in the mental realms. He has still to pierce through that veil.
But he uses the word curtain.
Yes, curtain.
And a curtain is translucent.
Yes,
translucent. It allows light to pass through.
The light. It reminds me, this when he speaks about this bright curtain that hangs between the human sight and the absolute vision.
Right.
It reminds me of something which the mother spoke about, thoughts and aphorisms. Now, of all the works of Sri Aurobindo, we leave aside Savitri, of course, for a moment. The one work which powerfully, as if catapults us, launches us, is like a wonderful launching pad towards something of the supramental glory, is thoughts and aphorisms. Because they as if bring two contrasts and suddenly synthesize them in a way that our mind could never conceive. And the mother speaks of it in her commentaries on thoughts and aphorisms. She says that I have an impression that Sri Aurobindo wrote these aphorisms when he was piercing and passing through from the intuitive mind to the supermind. So, this passage reminds me of that
Yes.
he is glimpsing a glory and he wants to pierce through. He is beginning to pierce through, and yet he is, say, partly here and partly is able to see there. So it's the curtain. But then he found the occult cave, the mystic door, near to the well of vision in the soul, and entered where the wings of glory brood, in the silent space where all is forever known. So he enters into that space where there is an endless extension of time.
Yes.
And therefore, this division that we create, or the mind creates into past, present and future, is one single flow. It's like when we look at the river from very close on one particular bank, then we see a portion of the river and we say, well, it's turbulent, or it's quiet, the water is cold, or it's warm, etc., etc. But if we go to a vantage point, then we see the whole river in a single flow. We see the river from the origin, and we see the river right up to the sea towards which it is flowing and into which it merges. Now that is a perspective of the whole time becomes a single body. That's how he describes it. So it's a vantage point from which he sees where, in the silent space where all is forever known. But we see it from a very narrow and small angle of vision.
Yes.
And now comes these lines which once again remind us of this phrase, time-born men.
Yes.
Because
yes.
time-born means subject to time. Time-born means mortality. Time-born means subjection to death.
Yes.
Because whatever is subject to one single moment or a limited space of time is perforce. There is a contrary force which draws it towards the infinity.
And he had to take birth.
He had to take
as
birth.
a time-born man.
Yes. And now, this particular phrase, it gives a very new meaning in the lines that follow. You see, it's something amazing which nowhere is mentioned in any of the biographies of Sri Aurobindo. Because Sri Aurobindo never openly spoke about it. But as you said, that is their divine humility. And the only means through which they could write about who they are and what they have done is Savitri. Yeah. And so here we have these lines which shake us to the very core. Mm-hmm. Indifferent to doubt and to belief, avid of the naked reals, single shock. We see the divine through layers and layers and layers. But to experience that splendor, naked reals, shock. We have a vision in the Gita where a great warrior like Arjuna is shaken to the core when he has glimpse of that glory. And the mothers, when she speaks about her vision of the Supreme, she says much more, much greater than the vision of the Gita. So even there we have a certain thin curtain.
Yes. Yes.
And even that is very difficult for him to bear, for the great hero of the Gita, the Mahabharata, Arjuna. And he says, please show me your milder version. I can't bear the sight of this.
Yeah.
And the mother says that her contact with the Supreme, it's much more, much greater,
Yeah.
much more splendid than the vision of the Gita.
Huda told me once, she said, I asked Mother, are you really the divine? Mother said, come tomorrow.
Okay.
She came, she said, Narad, from here up. She couldn't even speak. Mother showed her who she was.
So that's the naked real shock. But what follows is still more
Yes.
interesting. He showed the cord of mind that ties the earth heart and cast away the yoke of matter's law. The body's rules bound not the spirit's powers. When life had stopped its beats, death broke not in. He dared to live when breath and thought were still. Now you see, we have in Mother's biography mention of, she says that 3 times she had experienced death. And much later in the agenda, she speaks about dying without dying. She speaks about transmutation of death, where it's no more an opposite of life, but something other than life and death. And she uses the word over life. Now, Sri Aurobindo had experienced these things.
Yes.
He doesn't speak about it in his biography.
No.
And no wonder he said, my life is not on the surface.
Tremendous.
Someone who has experienced, as you read in that letter, that even when heartbeat has stopped, breath has stopped, death broke not in.
Yeah.
And in evening talks, he very passingly mentions, when he speaks about breathing, etc., he mentions that, well, you people believe that the instrument is the real thing. Instrument is only a device of nature. And he speaks of in context of first with water, then he speaks about breathing. And he speaks about breathing, that the breathing apparatus is only an instrument. But the real thing is prana, and it's possible to live even when the breath and heartbeat has stopped. But he gives the example of some other guru. And he himself gives the example of Agam Paramanand or something like that. He says that he could continue to live and even speak when the heartbeat has stopped. So, these possibilities which Sri Aurobindo himself experienced, and much, much more.
And other yogis have stopped
And-
their hearts also and stopped breathing.
But he very passingly speaks about it, that thus alone could he enter in that magic space. Because with a mortal body, as a time-born man, you are not allowed to enter that realm. You have to discard this casing, or you have to cut the cord. You can't go otherwise. That's the law. But the matter's law is no more binding to him. He dared to live when breath and thought were still. Thus could he step into that magic place. And now you mentioned about a few more yogis. So here comes this line, which few can even glimpse with hurried glance, lifted for a moment from mind's labored works and the poverty of nature's earthly sight. So there are few who have glimpsed it hurriedly. Sri Aurobindo speaks about that in one of his writings on Parabrahman. And he says that most of us enter into the portico and from there have a peep into God's wonderful mansion. And that's enough, because he says, if you enter, you can't come out. And Sri Ramakrishna spoke of something very similar. He says, when you walk on that edge, if ever you dare to lean a little more on the other side, you simply fall down and never come back. But here is Sri Aurobindo, who not only glances, but enters this magic place.
Steps into it.
Yeah, steps into it. And then, of course, comes that, because he has mentioned that this knowledge he was the first to have among time born men. But there are others who are privy to this knowledge, the gods with a capital G.
Yes.
So he says, all that the gods have learned is their self known. Gods have learned it through a long process of their own self discovery. The gods also launched themselves on a self discovery, as is there in some of the Indian legends that Brahma, the creator, and Vishnu, the preserver, they want to know their own origin. And they go upward and downward to discover their own origin. So they also discover. It's not evolution but a discovery. So they learn. Look at the word. Gods have learned. How do they learn? When they come into being, they learn. But Ashupati has reached that space where it's already known. All is known. Self-known. There in a hidden chamber closed and mute are kept the record graphs of the cosmic scribe, and there the tables of the sacred law. Even in a great work like the Ishopanishad, the seer Yajnavalk aspires to know the law of truth. What is it? What is it? It's not a human law, it's not a moral law, it's not an ethical law. It's none of these man-made laws. It's something which the mother says the only word you can use rightly to describe this law of truth is dharma. She uses this in agenda. So because there is no other word. It's a constant unfolding of a deep truth, of a deep mystery which is behind creation. And all that we can do is to align with it, and therefore we can live it. But he has entered there and he knows the sacred law. There is the book of being's index page, the text and glossary of the Vedic truth. Someone few days back was asking a question that, Sri Aurobindo says that Saina's interpretation and Shankaracharya's interpretation and Max Muller's interpretation and Swami Dayanand's interpretation are all, they touch upon few things, but they are not the real thing. And, Sri Aurobindo has, very interestingly, he says, I was fortunate not to have any of the interpretations of the Veda before me when I experienced the Vedic truths.
Yeah.
So he had experienced the Vedas or the truths in the Vedas, and then he came across the Veda and he found, at least there is a book which to some extent describes my experiences. And it's not the other way around.
Yes.
So where had he discovered it? Here comes the text and glossary of the Vedic truth. Are there the rhythms and meters of the stars, significant of the movements of our fate?
Interesting line.
Yes.
The stars are
Yes.
significant of the movements of our
Hieroglyphs. Actually, it's the same force which is all pervasive, which is moving the stars, moving the atoms, moving us, moving creation. So any which way we can get a hint. But that contains the truth of it. They are hints, they are hieroglyphs. Like Mother was asked that about volcanic eruptions or, earthquakes, etc. Are they because of man's ignorance, errors and sin? She said, no, it's not because of that. But they are both movements of the same, they are both movements which are hiding the same deep truth. So what is the deep truth? The deep truth is that both of them resist the free flow or free expression of that reality, that power. And therefore, there are cataclysms outside and there are cataclysms in human life. And she says that in reference to the supermind, that, now that the supermind has descended, some people ask that, we see a lot of natural calamities coming up. Then she said, no, it's not because human beings are resisting, therefore there are calamities. But both are signs of the same. Nature is resisting and human nature is also resisting. Material nature is resisting and human nature is resisting. At one point she says nature has begun to collaborate, but that's a different story.
Right.
1958. The symbol powers of number and of form. This whole thing which Tantra explores, the secret of numbers, of forms, which is called as yantra. Different forms express different realities. And when Satprem speaks about his guru who has given him to place the mantra in a certain way and to do it so many times. And he says, Mother, it's very boring, it's very taxing to me. She says, oh, she laughs, and then he says, oh, what has he told you? Then, he reveals step by step. And then she says, yes, 12 is Mahalakshmi's number. And then he says, you know what? It doesn't matter. These tantrics become too much bound to these numbers. So they knew the secret of these numbers and forms, but also what lies beyond it. And the secret code of the history of the world. How beautiful this is. You need to know that to understand what this march of civilizations is about. Otherwise, they are just events, wars and ambitions and progeny and lust and possession. When we look at it from surface, then it looks dismal. But when you have the secret code, then you see that through all this, God is expressing Himself. There is that beautiful aphorism that men die so that God may live and man be born. So that man may live and God be born. So that is, you discover that, oh, through all this, there is something which is happening. That secret code he has discovered.
And then he goes into it on the next page
in
great detail.
Yes, he goes on in great detail. And then these lines are wonderful. On the next page, very interesting lines. He speaks about the agreement. He discovers.
The dark agreement.
You see, very often we will see, these lines also remind me, Sri Aurobindo, in some letters, on the margin, he would just write a word or two. And that word or two changes the whole sense. It's like an answer to the letter. And look, these lines here. In the glow of the spirit's room of memories, he could recover the luminous marginal notes, dotting with light the crabbed ambiguous scrawl.
And crabbed, is like that.
But the luminous marginal notes which reveal the truth,
Yes.
that one word. And I have enjoyed some of, Sri Aurobindo's, I have seen some of his marginal notes on some letters. And it changes the whole sense. It's like an awakening. It may look very, even mothers, when somebody has asked a big question and on the margin, she just writes half a line. And it opens your eyes. Otherwise, the whole passage that the person has written appears, strange, and, why has he written? What sense does it make? So the luminous marginal notes rescue the preamble and the saving clause of the dark agreement by which all is ruled. So before this creation, when, the light becomes this night, if I may say so, there is a preamble to it. The preamble is that this will again be transmuted back into that. So this is the preamble. This is the precondition, which we don't know. So we have lost it. And there is a saving clause. The saving clause is that however thick the night, that light will be there to rescue, to save, and to carry us back. So this we don't read. We see only the darkness. And we don't see the saving clause. And we don't see the preamble. And therefore we suffer. But he has rescued. Of the dark agreement by which all is ruled, that rises from material nature's sleep, to clothe the everlasting in new shapes. He could reread now and interpret new its strange symbol letters, scattered abstruse signs. This whole creation is nothing but symbol letters of the divine.
Yeah.
And now he could see the sense. Then there is also this wonderful, this word. Its riddling phrases and its blindfold terms, the deep oxymoron of its truths, replicas.
Yeah, an oxymoron is two terms that contrast each other.
Seriously joking.
Seriously joking, Shakespeare says sweet sorrow. Some humorous people in the ashram say happy marriage.
Happy living death. So many oxymorons.
Yes, yes. And repliques is a
French word.
Just means replies. But see, he uses repliques because it had to be
Yeah.
there.
I mean, you can't replace certain words in certain languages with another word, because they are expressions of a certain state of consciousness which a certain section of humanity has experienced. Like many Sanskrit words, he says, like Ananda. Actually, it is non-translatable, but we use the word delight and bliss because there is no other way. But it's something not translatable. See, Sri Aurobindo speaks of that. So similarly, replique. And recognize as a just necessity its hard conditions for the mighty work. Nature's impossible Herculean toil, only her warlock wisecraft could enforce. Its law of the opposition of the gods, its list of inseparable contraries. Not only the titans oppose us, the gods also oppose us. So Sri Aurobindo and the mother gave us freedom not only from the titans, but also from the gods. And this is what she meant when she spoke about that the age of religions is over. Now this phrase is being used in many ways.
Yeah.
But when she was asked, she gave a very simple, direct answer with no ambiguity. She said it means that previously it was the age of the overmind gods. So now we don't have to go through all this zigzag of the gods where we worship one god, he like a relay race, pass on the baton to another and to another. That's not necessary. That's what it means, very simple and direct, that the age of the religions is over. She even made some of these gods conscious of their limitations and surrender, like Durga. Today we are going through the Durga, the 9 Durgas festival, and the mother asked her, do you like when people worship you? And she says, mother, no, but what can I do? Because she's a great goddess, she wouldn't like. She said, mother, but what can I do? She said, why? Why not? You surrender to the Supreme. Then she says, these gods, they don't know what surrender is. Because each of them feels absolute in his glory. So powerful, so powerful. Humanity can get crushed under its weight. We have images of Shiva where his toe presses upon Himalaya and mighty Asura like Ravana gets crushed. And then he has the famous Shiv Stotra, which he sings to make him release. Now that is their power. They don't know that there is something still greater, the source of all things, and the opposition of the gods. And they don't allow you to go beyond. The Upanishads speak about men as the cattle of the gods. They will help you, they will drive you, they will give you protection, but they want worship in return. But here we have the Divine Mother who wants nothing but receptivity.
Yes.
She is the giver. Who else can? She wants nothing from us. But be open and receive at least what I am giving.
And they asked her that.
Yes.
What
they
do
asked
you
her.
expect from us?
Nothing.
She said nothing.
And what could we expect from you? Everything.
Everything.
So this is how, it goes. And then again, few lines below, what he discovers the mystery of God's covenant with the night. It's a very powerful, deep, pregnant with meaning.
Yes.
God's covenant with night. God chooses to be unholy, if I may say in a semi-humorous way. Mother speaks of it in the agenda. You must take your own burden of the anti-divine. It's something very powerful. He goes into the night, smears himself with the night, and says, here I come, let's have a game. Let's see whether your darkness is stronger or whether this light can transmute you. Sri Aurobindo spoke of that. Some of the greatest disciples are great asuras.
Absolutely, yes.
God's covenant with the night. And she even says, what will I do with innocent angels? So this is the other side. And why would the divine take this plunge into the night? And he discovers it. And what he discovers, Once more was heard in the still cosmic mind the eternal's promise to his laboring force, inducing the world passion to begin, the cry of birth into mortality, and the opening verse of the tragedy of time.
For me, that line is as great as anything Shakespeare ever wrote.
Absolutely. Opening verse of the tragedy.
Opening verse of the tragedy of time.
What a wonderful reminder that we have forgotten the promise, but the eternal stands by his promise, and in a certain state of consciousness we can recover that promise of the eternal. In Indian myth there is this, the promise of the Lord. And I suppose this is the deepest meaning of the phrase, and God said, let there be light, and there was light.
And there was light.
It is, not as some people very, crudely try to say, oh, so creation came like this. It's not about creationism. It's the original promise of the Lord that there comes the last act is enclosed in the first scene. I mean, I often visualize this phrase of the Bible as, some of these epics, and even this is like Savitri is like that. That in the beginning is prepared the close. So you are shown the last shot in the beginning, and then the drama begins. That's what even in Savitri we see. That darkness slips and fails like a falling robe from the reclining body of a god. Almost that day, the epiphany was disclosed.
Yes.
So when it is said, and God said, let there be light, and there was light, it's not only about the moment of creation, it's also about the moment of the close.
Yes.
And God keeps that promise. We forget it. And that's how it will be, an earth grow unexpectedly divine, when darkness is deep, strangling the earth's breast. So you see Eternal's promise to his, and that's why he comes time to time in various personas and forms to bring the light. He doesn't forget the promise. The cry of birth into mortality and the opening verse of the tragedy of time. So all this Ashwapati discovers. And then on the next page, again you see this marvelous line. And saw the signature and fiery seal of wisdom on the dim power's hooded work, who builds in ignorance the steps of light. So these three lines remind me at a very practical level of two anecdotes we may say. One is when someone, a disciple, I think from Gujarat, wrote to Sri Aurobindo this thing from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, this mantra, Asado ma sadgamya, tamso ma jyotirgamya, mrityor ma amritam gamya. Now, like any disciple, we are all full of ignorances and full of our weaknesses, imperfection. But something within us, even in this dim, hooded ignorance, something cries out. And below it, we have the signature and the fiery seal. You know how Sri Aurobindo replied to this? Sri Aurobindo wrote below, Tathastu, Sri Aurobindo. So be it, Sri Aurobindo. Once this card was distributed also in the ashram way back, I don't know, late 80s or maybe early 90s. It was written to a Gujarati disciple who just wrote these three lines. And he says, pray. After that there is a prayer. Now Sri Aurobindo responds to the prayer in a very simple way. He simply writes Tathastu. So be it, Sri Aurobindo. So when I read these lines, and saw the signature and the fiery seal. Several times the mother to people who would ask, Mother, will you lead me to that truth? Will I share this glory? And various ways. And the mother would say, yes. That yes is so powerful. Sometimes their one word is so powerful if we really go into it. This is not just a yes, a casual yes, that yes, okay, it's a promise, it's a hope. No, it's a certainty. The mother speaks of that when she asked Sri Aurobindo that, do you think the world is ready? Will we succeed this time? Will the supermind descend? And she says, Sri Aurobindo looked and said yes. And at that very moment, she saw a massive descent of the supramental truth into the world. This is the signature and the fiery seal. God's yes. Tathastu. And that's how he reaches that point where he discovers these last 5 lines on this passage. A purpose mingled with the whims of time. So reassuring.
Yes, yes.
Everything in life, even the most random events, seemingly random events, our casual footsteps, as it is said in Savitri.
Yes.
Time's unforeseen events, God's random plan. Unforeseen events. Smallest, our least stumblings are foreseen above.
Yes.
So everything that happens in life, with that there is something which is mixed, which alters its nature.
Canto 4, he works through the
vicissitudes of our lives. He works through the hard breath of battle and toil. He works through our sins, our sorrows, and our tears. Whatever the appearance we must bear, when nothing we can see but drift and bail, a mighty guidance leads us still through all. You see, this thing that there is a purpose and a guidance mingling with the flow of time, again like loiters.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something which stands there, coexisting. All the time, with every event, there is the pressure of this evolutionary force. It's the original purpose, and it pushes everything in that direction, turns everything in that direction, makes even of our fall a means for greater rise. So he discovers that. A purpose mingled with the whims of time. Look at the choice of words, or the whims of time. So it seems to us. Oh, this happened to so and so. Ah, fancy. Look at accident. Chance. But no, there is a purpose. I'm reminded of an event when somebody was wrongly implicated in an event, which the person said, wrongly means the person said, no, I'm not involved in it at all. But the mother told him, you leave the ashram and go. So he was very disturbed. And he goes to Nalnida and said, mother has said this, but no, it is not true. I have another version of the story. And Nalnida told him, if mother has said this, obey it, because she knows what she is doing. And it will help you. So he left with this trust. After 15 years.
This was a very devoted worker.
Very devoted
mother.
Worker. Very devoted worker.
And she said she did what was best for him.
Yes.
For his soul.
And when he comes back after 15 years, he says, my God, that was the turning point of my life. Yeah. It was a big grace. So, the ways of the infinite Shakti are beyond human comprehension. Yes. I know of somebody else's story also, but, that person is still alive, so I will not speak about. Same thing, mother asked this person to go. And the person says that it was the defining, changing moment of my life which gave me such a tremendous push towards her. So you see, divine wisdom doesn't work according to human calculations.
One quick anecdote, Aurobindo Basu told me. He said he wrote to Sri Aurobindo wanting to come and live in the ashram. Sri Aurobindo said, I have spoken with the mother and we feel that you should see a little more of life. 16 years they kept him out.
So many ways, Amal Kiran came and went away, back and forth. So, but in all this, there is something which goes on. There is a purpose. Yeah. It looks like a whimsical God has created this world. No logic. But there is a deep logic, the logic of the infinite, which far surpasses and transcends our finite logic. So here, look, a purpose mingled with the whims of time. A meaning met the stumbling pace of chance. Yeah. And fate revealed a chain of seeing will.
This is incredible.
When we look at on the surface, it's chance or karma or whatever else. But when we look from the depths, it's a seeing will, not a blind will. A blind God is not destiny's architect. There is a meaning in each curve and line. So there is a seeing will which guides the flow and the flux of time through which we move. So how beautiful this is.
Last two lines.
Yes. A conscious wideness filled the old dumb space. In the void, he saw throned the omniscience supreme. This is omniscience. Omniscience is not just, knowing what is going to happen next. Omniscience is also determining what is going to happen next. It's one with omnipotence.
And he sees it in the void.
In the void. In the void, he saw throned the omniscience supreme.